Alright, so this video is titled Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Bruce Lee. Somebody asked me a question, basically about action stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and why, if I consider them martial artists. So I figured that I'm going to talk about specifically Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Lee and the comparison of the two. And the way that I see it is that when you train in martial arts, everybody has their own experience of it. And through my experiences and my understanding of what martial arts is, my view and my vision is different. So there's certain people that I would consider martial artists and certain people that I don't. It doesn't necessarily mean that one person is better than another. It's just a simple. It's more of a thing about categorization of where people are. So basically, like, you wouldn't call a football player a basketball player. They're separate. They're different. You wouldn't call like somebody that's a singer the same as someone that's a dancer. They're different. A bodybuilder and a football player are different. Okay, a gymnast and a martial artist are different. So through my training, I have a vision of what I feel real martial arts is that I try to communicate to the public. And the difference between why it's so difficult with the martial arts is that it's not clearly defined like how a sport is clearly defined. A sport is just basically defined by rules and categorized. So we know what soccer is, what game that is, based on certain rules. We know what badminton is. We know what tennis is. We know what golf is, because these are all confined by rules. But martial arts, there is no such thing as confining it into something that's governed by people, like a governing body of these sports. Like, there is no such thing for the martial arts, and that's why it creates such confusion and in people and what is considered martial arts and what is not. But back to the Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Lee. Now, Kung Fu, the real meaning of it, and the meaning that I go by, which is the real meaning, is like the discipline that you have to better yourself. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with combat. So with that real meaning of Kung Fu, Arnold Schwarzenegger has Kung Fu, a good amount of Kung Fu, and so did Bruce Lee. They both had great Kung Fu. That's why they are both famous and well known and successful, So Arnold Schwarzenegger's Kung Fu was in bodybuilding. He won 7 Mr. Olympias in a row. Or not in a row, but he won 7 Mr. Olympias. That's an amazing feat. So his Kung Fu was in bodybuilding. Bruce Lee's Kung Fu was in a lot of different things, but he was a great martial artist. He was great in the expression of combat mainly, and he was highly physically fit as well. Okay, so, and he was a great actor as well. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger was great in the bodybuilding, right? But he did admit that he took steroids, so in a way that makes me lose respect for him in the form, because I feel that taking steroids is cheating, and it's not like a real natural development. Even Sylvester Stallone admitted to take steroids, but I do respect them both for admitting it. I respect that, rather than hiding the fact. So that's one thing that you gotta put in consideration, is that Arnold Schwarzenegger was taking steroids. Now, Bruce Lee, he never said that he was on steroids, and there's never evidence to prove that he was on steroids. So Bruce Lee's physical development was, as far as I know, more of a natural development through hard work and good nutrition and genetics. So I give Bruce Lee great credit for that. But Arnold Schwarzenegger taking steroids, that's kind of, I mean, it's not kind of, it's cheating already, and it's almost like the difference between like Lance Armstrong, who's on testosterone and winning all these awards, against somebody, that the person that didn't win but was, you know, really good but wasn't on anything. You know, it's just that these people that take these these steroids, I mean, they're cheating, and really it's just not fair. You know, it's like somebody, instead of somebody running the marathon, you know, he rides a bike halfway through, or he jumps into a car halfway through. It's just not fair. So I don't give credit for Arnold Schwarzenegger for that. You know, so I heavily criticize that aspect. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a lot of opportunities to act in a lot of movies, and he made a lot of money doing that. Now, is he considered a good actor? I don't, in my opinion, I wasn't too, I don't think he's a good actor. But he was famous for it. He made a lot of money. You know, Bruce Lee, I feel, was a great actor. You know, it was in him. He was acting in movies before he was even practicing martial arts. He was more of an, partly the main reasons why he's so famous is because he was so good in acting, and that basically, like, that combined with the martial arts just basically highlighted everything. You know, so I feel that Bruce Lee was a great actor, and it was more of a natural development in him, you know, through hard work and real kung fu, opposed to Arnold Schwarzenegger and steroids. And I don't think he was a good actor, but that's my opinion. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, bodybuilding, acting. As far as combat is concerned, I don't think Arnold Schwarzenegger was good in combat. You know, that was not his primary focus, and you know, just because people kick and punch doesn't mean that they're an expert in combat. And just because they train a few months in something doesn't mean they're a true expert in it, where it's their life, their way of life. So I mean, you got a lot of actors like Keanu Reeves, who might take some martial arts classes for a few months before he does The Matrix, but he's not. Martial arts is not his way of life. Martial arts was the way of life for Bruce. From the time that he started until he died, martial arts was truly his expression, the combative aspect. And, you know, clearly that was his field that Arnold cannot touch. So, you know, that was Bruce's field. You know, and it's not about like pairing them up to see who could beat who up. It's more about what their passion is and how they expressed it, as far as like in their physical expression of it. That doesn't have to be violent, but you know, they're clearly different in different weight classes, and you know, different physique levels, different heights. But the way that Bruce moved his body, the way that he knew about the intricacies of combat, was something that, you know, Arnold knew nothing about. You know, so it's like, you know, and it's like comparing the difference between like an ant, which is very small but very strong, and amazing things that an ant can do, compared to like something bigger like an elephant. You know, they're different. You can't say that, oh, you know, let's put the ant against the elephant. No, it's just, they're different. You know, but Bruce's talent was in the science of combat, and that was his way of life. But it was not the way of life for Arnold. Not at all. So Arnold really knows nothing about the combat. I mean, not nothing, but that's not his way of life. You can't like say, you know, there's a difference between someone who has been like an electrician for like 40 years, you know, opposed to somebody who just goes to Home Depot, gets a book and does a few things, and that's it. That's not his living. That's not his way of life. It's not his way of making a living. You know, it's the difference between like somebody who's a judge who studied like the law for like 30 years, difference between him and somebody like a police officer who just knows a little bit about the law. You know what I mean? Like, Bruce studied the way of fighting as a way of life. That's not what Arnold did. So Arnold is not a martial artist in that regard, as far as the combat, like studying of it, the science of it. And the way that Arnold trained physically was to show the muscles and its definition and size. It's aesthetic. It's for like show flashiness. But Bruce did physical fitness for a specific function and purpose behind that physical fitness, which was geared towards combat. So it's different. You know, it's like you prepare and train the muscles to accomplish certain objectives based on the expression of combat. It's different than training physically just to have good sex appeal or to make your muscles look larger and more defined. It's a different type of training. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was not training for, you know, efficiency in combat. He was training physically for aesthetic and looking good and having good sex appeal. You know, so Arnold's physical fitness development was not geared towards martial arts, and his mind was not geared towards martial arts because he wasn't that into the combative aspect the way Bruce was. And of course, Bruce had the spirituality and the philosophy of the martial arts ingrained in him, and that's what he studied, and he loved to study. He would read books on the philosophy of the martial arts. He would read books on the teachings of the East. He'd read books on Buddha and meditation. These are all relevant to the spiritual development in the martial arts, which is about like developing a compassion within this violent expression. There is still compassion and love and no ego and like peacefulness. But Arnold didn't study that. Arnold didn't care about that. You know, it's like going into a bookstore. Like, what book are you gonna pick up? Bruce would go towards like Eastern philosophy, which is like the spirit of the martial arts. Arnold wouldn't go to the Eastern philosophy. Arnold would go somewhere else. You know, so it's clear that Arnold Schwarzenegger was not a martial artist. You know, it is very clear to me. But he did make a lot of action movies, you know, and he was physically fit, but it wasn't for the martial arts, but he was physically fit. He did work hard, you know, as far as like becoming a bodybuilder. You know, he made a lot of movies, he made a lot of money, and now he's the governor, so he got into the politics. He's got a lot of fame, he's got a lot of money, he works hard, he has a lot of kung fu, but his kung fu is different, a different focus than what Bruce's kung fu was. Bruce's kung fu was truly towards martial arts. That was his thing and his way of life. So Bruce Lee was a martial artist. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a martial artist. Is not a martial artist and never was. Even right now, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I would say he's not even a bodybuilder anymore. He was a bodybuilder, but now he's not a bodybuilder. He was never a martial artist, and he still is not a martial artist. Now he's a governor and an actor still. You know, he still makes movies here and there. But that's it. That's what he is. But you know, it is what it is. And you know, people have their likes and dislikes, and it's not that one is better than another. It's just more about your preference and what you like. You know what I mean? Some people like to watch figure skating. They think it's great. Some people like gymnastics and they love watching gymnastics. They think it's great. Some people like to watch wrestling and they think it's great. Some people like to watch basketball. They think it's great. Some people like to watch soccer. They think it's great. You look at the Olympics and all these games that they have. You know, they have different games for different people. It's not necessarily that one game is better than another game, but there is a clear distinction between the differences between one game and another. You know, and I personally, I don't like wrestling. I don't watch it. I don't want nothing to do with it. I'd rather watch figure skating, like female figure skating, than I would watch men wrestling together. I'd rather watch female figure skating. I love watching gymnastics, the men and the women gymnastics. I love that. I'm not into soccer. I don't watch that. Football, I don't really watch it. Basketball, pretty cool. I love martial arts, but I don't like pointless violence, which is just like these stupid action movies. You know, and people, they don't really understand the difference between action movies and real martial arts, but I understand it. I know the difference, and really, to find real martial arts movies, it's rare, and it's probably something that you'll never really see. um, but obviously all of Bruce Lee's movies were martial art movies, but Fearless was an amazing movie from Jet Li that I consider a martial arts movie. Hero was a martial arts movie that I consider an amazing movie. House of Flying Daggers, an amazing movie that I consider a martial arts movie. Even Matrix, the meaning behind Matrix is an amazing movie, and I would even consider that, you know, some martial arts in there too. But you don't really find too many movies out there that really have real, like, martial arts. But, you know, most of it is all just pointless violence, and even that movie Matrix, you know, like, there's not, the violence in that movie is not just all pointless. There's a deep meaning behind that movie that symbolizes something significant, and that's what makes the movie so great. Even the movie Gladiator, you know, I really like that movie, and that movie has some meaning behind that violence. You know what I mean? It's trying to teach something in that movie that I really liked. You know, but mostly all these movies that Arnold Schwarzenegger stars in, none of it has any meaning whatsoever. It's just a bunch of violence and explosions, and I'm not into that, not at all. You know, so that's my feedback on it. You know, like I said, not one is better than the other. It's basically your preference, and we need to basically better categorize certain things. If we're gonna put things in certain categories, we need to better categorize it so we don't confuse people. Like, don't say that a basic action movie is martial arts, and don't say that martial arts is just action. You know, they are different. You know, and when you really learn about martial arts, then you may start to understand these differences, and you'll have more appreciation for the people that really like study the art, opposed to just, you know, just watering down everything until it becomes just something that's far from art. You know, I think a lot of it boils down to understanding what art really is, and living in this world that we live in, this modernized world that's basically revolved around so much technology. I think it's harder and harder for people to understand what art is. You know what I mean? Like, people that really create their own songs, like, that's an artist. That you truly create your own music. Not somebody who just downloads a bunch of MP3s. That's not an artist. But people think, oh, this is my music and my iPod. It's not your music. You just downloaded a bunch of other people's music. That's not yours. People just have a hard time understanding what art is, you know? Like actually creating your own martial art, opposed to just like gathering a bunch of information from other people and then presenting it as if it's your own when it's not. It's just a bunch of other people's stuff. It ain't yours. That's not your art. It didn't come from your heart. It came from everything external outside of you, and you're just presenting it as if it's your own when it's not. That's not art. So I think people have a really lack of understanding of what art is, because of modern technology has made us become dependent on machines and other people. But true art comes from within, and it's rare. That's why you don't really meet that many true martial artists in this world.